I've got my phone right beside me, so I can time off that. But
you can shout at me if you think I'm just going on for far too long. You never know, I might just go mad because I'm talking about something I really love, aren't I? Yeah.
Right. Oh, it's. There we go. So we are live.
Okay, very good.
How do you pronounce Lechlade? Is it Lechlade?
Lechlade, yes. And this is the approach to Lechlade, which I walked on. It was actually the very last day of May, and it was 30 degrees, and it was literally like Blackpool Beach. Of course, that was way back in terms of the lockdown. It was extraordinary how many people there were there. So it wasn't quite this bucolic scene. It was heaving, and lots of people jumping in the water and having a lovely time. Actually, it has to be said. But I was picking my way through, and Bob drove over to pick me up and said, "Do you want an ice cream?" Which was quite tempting. And then we looked at the queues and thought, "No, we don't worry about that."
Yes. Oh, it sounds wonderful.
Was 23 miles. That was.
No, not yet, but it'll just go, it'll start a moment. So people will start logging on in a moment, I think.
Well, if it's just the three of us, that's fine too.
Go for a drink together.
Yes.
I've got my phone right beside me, so I can time off that. But
you can shout at me if you think I'm just going on for far too long. You never know, I might just go mad because I'm talking about something I really love, aren't I?
Yes, people are logging in now.
Good. Yeah.
Right. Oh. There we go. So we are live.
Very good.
how do you pronounce Lechlade? Is it Lechlade?
Lechlade, yes. And this is the approach to Lechlade, which I walked on. It was actually the very last day of May. And
why is this replaying what we last said?
It shouldn't be now. Is it now?
It stopped.
Yeah, no, that was my computer playing it back.
Okay.
I've switched it off.
Sarah's computer's had a good day today.
Yes, my mind of its own all day, I think.
Yes. Well, we couldn't get my mic to pick up sufficiently when we started, so I've moved into Claire's supercomputer. I would probably fly to the moon if I knew how to control it, but
no, people are definitely logging in, so this is good. No, we won't be able to, because you won't be able to.
So you don't have any what?
We've got 11 at the moment.
They'll see you, will they?
That's what they see. So, yeah, numbers going up. Yes. No, well, Fiona and Andrew won't be, because they won't be looking. Well, what are we doing? Give it another minute, and then numbers are still going up. So
What sort of number are you up to now?
we're 24 now, but I'm sure it's still creeping up.
Good.
Picture of you there. You on the picture.
Well, I mean, numbers are still creeping up, but maybe we should give it a go. Start, because it's 5 past now.
I'm ready anytime you
Yes,
two.
well,
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Andrew. Yeah.
I'm off, am I?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, good evening, everybody. It's a bit of a clue that I'm wearing an Emmanuel tie, but I'm Andrew Fain and I'm president of the Emmanuel Society. It's ironic that my role tonight is to introduce the master. Well, the master needs very much less introduction to you all than I do, because our dear master, Dame Fiona, is extremely well known to all of us. And that is no doubt largely why we're all watching her talk this evening. As we know, she's been our master for 8 years, and it's been a very distinguished tenure. We know she is sadly leaving us at the end of July 2021. You note I didn't say retire, I said leave. She's far too young to dream of retirement, and it's very interesting, and some of you will have spotted this, but many probably not, that it has been announced already that after she has completed her term with us, which is July 2021, she will be taking up the extremely prestigious role of chairman of the board of the National Audit Office, charged with ensuring value for money above all amongst all government departments. Well, I don't need to tell anybody how important that role is. And I think it just reflects on the standing and the reputation of the really rather delightful lady that we've all enjoyed having as our master for 8 years. Now, normally, of course, we'd be meeting in the theatre of the Queen's Building in Emmanuel. Fiona tonight has felt it rather more practical to invite us into her living room, where she is currently seated and will very soon take over from me, you'll be delighted to hear. Sadly, the only bad news is there will be no dinner in hall to follow. That's really not practical. But we will have this talk, and it is Walking for Country Life, she's chosen to call it. Many of you will have seen her articles in Country Life about once a month. They're always a delight. They very much are articles written by a professional geographer, and I think we should not forget that, but with the most delicious turn of phrase, really elegantly phrased. So just one quote out of her current article: "The young river meanders through fields as if it had all the time in the world." Well, isn't that beautiful and descriptive? And it's talking about the Thames, but I won't preempt anything she may be going to say. I just want to welcome you to this Emmanuel lecture given to us by our master, Dame Fiona Reynolds, and I'm absolutely delighted to hand over to her. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and thank you, Fiona.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and hello to everybody. Yes, I'm going to tell you about Walking for Country Life, which for me, as anyone who knows me would know perfectly well, is no labour at all, because I simply love walking. In fact, I'm pretty much obsessed with walking, and I walk every day, rain or shine, and it's a big part of my life. It started in my childhood, and I was dragged up mountains and down caves and around cathedrals and all the rest of it by my wonderful parents. This actually on the right is not my father. My father is, as always, behind the camera. This was some of you came along to help us over the Cribgoch Ridge, which some of you will know is extremely scary, with these 5 daughters, the little one only about 5. There's me, about 10, and my other sisters, and we were just always walking. So actually it's in my DNA, but I have always walked, but perhaps particularly since I've been in Cambridge, I get up very, very early and walk every day to Bates Bike Lock. And sometimes it is simply spectacular, and you have to be up at 5 in the morning to see this kind of sight. And my phone is just full of extraordinary pictures of what Cambridge is like before most people are out of bed. But actually, since being at home during the lockdown, I walk even further than to Bates Bike Lock and back. I walk about 8 miles every morning with my trusty companion. This is Lucy, who is now 13 and getting very, very slow, but she just loves walking. And we go everywhere and have lots of different routes and really enjoy our lockdown walking. And I take pictures every day and tweet them. And some of you may see me on Twitter. If you're not, here's an unashamed advert. But I do see the most beautiful things. Actually, you can't see the right-hand picture, which is a beautiful sunrise, but it is marvelous to just, I literally tweet about beauty. No controversy in my life, just beauty. And it reminds me of every single walk I do. I find something extraordinary to take a photograph of and to write about. Now, I started writing a column, a walking column, about 6 years ago. It started with Country Walking magazine, but for the last 3 years, it's been with Country Life. And I have to say, I adore Country Life. They're wonderful to work for and great fun. And I'm frankly amazed, actually, how many people do see it. Perhaps it's the doctor's waiting room syndrome, but they look like this. This one is Arnside and Silverdale. And lots of people say they've seen it and enjoyed it. And I get lots and lots of positive feedback, which is very good for my soul. And lots of people say, well, it must be really easy. You love walking, you love the countryside, it must be easy. And I have to say to them, you know what? It's not actually that easy, because every single month I need to go somewhere different. I need to write about something new and make a story. And I have to fit that into a life which is not exactly full of spare time. So it's quite a challenge, but I absolutely love it. And I thought I would just give you some stories about the challenge and how it all works. So what are they? Well, first of all, I need to get around the country. So I live in Cambridge in the term time and Gloucestershire in the holidays for rather less time. But you know, you can't just write about areas within 20 miles of each of those 2 places every month. People would just not find that acceptable. So I have to be more creative than that. And fortunately, oh, that's interesting. In 2016, I published a book, The Fight for Beauty, which the cover is supposed to be here. There it is. And it's sort of been a ticket to giving speeches around the country. And some of you will know I work first of all for the Campaign for National Parks, and then the Campaign to Protect Rural England, and then the National Trust, which are organisations which have an amazing rootedness in the countryside. So actually, I've got lots of friends all around the country, and I get asked to speak all over the place. And of course, I want to accept, and I want to accept in order, not least, so I can do a walk. So my wonderful PA, Michelle, and I hope she's watching, but she knows, and she is absolutely brilliant, is that I want to say yes to everything. She somehow makes it happen and makes time to fit in a walk as well. Now, sometimes that means getting up at ridiculous times in the morning to fit it all in, but I'm used to that, and that's not a problem, but it can be quite tight. And I think this was one of the tighter examples. This was an article I wrote about Derby. First of all, the Derby mills along the river, and then secondly, out to Kedleston. So my day started, I think, at 4 in the morning, where I got up. It was fortunately early in the spring. I walked up the Derwent Valley to look at the mills and get a sense of the industrial history of Derby, and then I went to the conference, did my speech at the conference, and walked out to Kedleston, which is here, and was able to relate the story of Derby's industrial development with the extraordinary story of the Curzon family. So it's all about finding stories and finding connections. Second, you know, I really do need to have something to say. It's not just physically going somewhere, but it's finding a story and hopefully making it an interesting one. And here my training as a geographer, which Andrew mentioned, is incredibly useful. So I've got a good sense of the landscape, history of the country, a good sense of the kind of way in which place and people connect over a long period of time. And I know England particularly pretty well, secondly Wales, a little bit Northern Ireland, and I can usually dredge up something that from my memory that sparks off a little bit of research, a bit of reading, often buying lots of books and kind of rediscovering things. And I've used everything from childhood memories, literature, poetry, campaigns, conservation battles. All of these things in some way or other have inspired different articles. And in a sense, the background of my book, which tells the story about the fight for beauty over the last couple of centuries, usually means that I've got something in there that I can use as a hook to hang a story on. So, for example, some of them recall childhood experiences. So this is Connect. And actually, I dragged my sister and her husband and 2 boys up there a couple of summers ago to rewalk Connect, which was actually the very first mountain I ever climbed when I was about 5. And on the right is, I'm going to drop in some of the Country Life illustrations. They saw some news, which are always amazing. They're not quite sharp enough, but just to give you the idea. Some are very much focused around current campaigns. So this was my friend Dick Bate, who I used to work with at CPRE, who lives near the North Downs. And he took me up and was talking to me about all the campaigns that still exist to try and protect not just the actual AONB of the North Downs, the area of outstanding natural beauty, but the view from it, from massive development pressures for housing, industrial warehouses and the rest. And at the time I was working on the Glover review of protected landscapes. And so it was incredibly useful to be able to go and sort of live the experience up on the North Downs with someone who knows it absolutely intimately. And then I usually find some other nice stories. So this was quite a recent one where I went to Bagby Woods, which was another childhood memory, in Thorsley, where of course the previous master, Lord St. John Stevens, is buried in the church, not in Thorsley, but the next village. And again, just felt a very Emmanuel story, which in fact, Country Life headed that one in the master's footsteps. So it was just a nice little turn of phrase. So I'm looking always for some quirky story or some emotional connection or something that just, I think, will bring out a nice narrative for people to enjoy. Quite often, actually, I've forced other people to join me, and it is a bit of a route march sometimes. This, I forgot to take a picture of the person, but in fact, it was the Lake District National Park Chief Executive, and I made him walk 12 miles on a very wintry January day in Arnside at Silverdale, so he could talk to me about the problems the Lake District was going through at the time. So we talked all the way, but still had a most extraordinary walk. And actually, these are trustees of the Grosvenor Estate who I made climb a mountain in Scotland when we were up there on an away day, and they loved it. Actually, it was a fantastic experience. This is up Ben Stack. So again, an amazing day in May. And third, so you've got, these different criteria I'm trying to fulfill all the time. Third, it has to be a good walk. And here, of course, it's back to the good old Ordnance Survey. And I've got an amazing collection of Ordnance Survey maps. It's got to be 2.5 inch because they're the right scale. And in fact, I mean, rather romantically, when I went on Desert Island Discs now a long time ago, I chose as my luxury a full set of Ordnance Survey maps of the British Isles. And rather naively, I thought, well, they will arrive nicely packaged, in a week or so's time as a present from the BBC. Of course, that doesn't actually happen, very sadly. But over the years, I've pretty much put a full collection together, and I just adore maps. But in fact, Sarah Bendel was the instigator of the real trick, because for my birthday, quite a while ago now, Sarah, actually, she gave me the app, the Ordnance Survey app, which she generously renews every year. And it is an absolutely extraordinary app. If you haven't got it already, it's just worth its weight in gold. And so what I do is I plot my walks on a map. And here are just 2 examples to show you. On the left is Exmoor, when I did a walk through Lorna Doone country. And actually, lo and behold, a few months later, the National Trust announced it's acquiring a whole lot of the land up the valley on Lorna Doone country in Exmoor. That one was 14 miles. That was quite a trek. And on the right, and of course, I don't know if you can see the whole slide, but this was Octavia Hill and Crookham Church, where she is buried, and the walks that she took. And Octavia Hill, of course, one of the founders of the National Trust, and somebody that I'm extraordinarily kind of motivated by. She's a real heroine of mine. And so, you know, one of the things I love to do is walk in landscapes where I feel I can connect with people who I admire. And even if I never knew them, I can feel a sense of connection with them over the years. So, you know, when I want to create a walk, I look at both the paper map and the online map. You might think that's a bit mad, but actually I find that you need to use the whole spread of the sheet of the map, first of all, to get a real sense of what will be the best route and how you will be able to really sort of connect with the landscape. And then I plot it on the Ordnance Survey, and then off I go. So, you know, sometimes I've made mistakes, and there was one actually recently. I walked to Erith with a friend of mine just before the lockdown, actually in February, and I had no idea that the whole landscape had been ploughed up for gravel and was completely horrible, and completely all the public footpaths were destroyed. So you can get it wrong. The map doesn't tell you everything, but over the years I've become reasonably good at reading an Ordnance Survey map and imagining what it's like on the ground. And sometimes I know the territory anyway. And so finally, what happens is that I send my piece in to Country Life, and bless them, they don't edit it very much, actually. They're very, very nice people to work with, but they always find an illustration, and they love that. And so do I enjoy watching what they'll find, and it can vary. And I'm just going to show you you know, some of the illustrations which give you a sense of the kind of atmosphere that they try to create with the articles too. So this one was when I walked Hadrian's Wall, which everybody will know, I hope, is Sycamore Gap. It's one of the most famous. Andrew knows that, don't you? You walked that recently. It's very, very famous place along Hadrian's Wall. This is Minsmere, where I was bitten listening, which was absolutely marvelous, and we heard bitterns. This was in, I think, May last year, so that was incredible. This is actually where it went with the Derbyshire Mills article, which is a gorgeous kind of, I love these industrial drawings which capture both the beauty of the countryside and the serenity. Look, the swans as well as the belching chimneys. This was Wooler, and actually very sort of sad story here, because we were scattering my sister's ashes up in the Cheviots, and I felt somehow they found this incredibly moving, beautiful picture to illustrate that article up in the north of Northumberland. This was the Burren in Ireland, and this incredible limestone scenery, which are just, again, beautifully illustrated. This was Erith, actually, where we had all the problems with the footpaths, and that's an incredible landscape, way out into the fens, and really evocative and moving place to walk. And this is another. I did 3 lockdown walks in Cirencester, and actually after I'd done the 3rd one, they said maybe you can go a little bit further afield now. I think 3 in one place, but for understandable reasons is enough. But this is from Cirencester Park, looking back down the long ride to Cirencester, which is obviously, I know this area like the back of my hand, and it's rather wonderful to them to have found a gorgeous picture to describe it. So that's how it works. Those are the challenges that I've got. And I suppose the big question is, does it come off? And does it work? Well, I hope it does, because I do get lovely feedback. But actually, for this talk, for the first time, I sat down and worked out where I'd been and how well I was doing on my geographical spread, which is actually the most difficult thing for me to achieve. And this is a really bad look at my wobbly red lines, but this is it. So there are a couple that are off completely. So Ben Stack in Sutherland is off, and Loch Lomond is off. The New Forest is in, but Guernsey is off, and the Burren was off for obvious reasons. But everywhere else is there. And actually, I feel quite proud of that as a geographical spread. It's rather lacking on the Midlands, isn't it? So I think I know where I need to go to fill the gaps in future. And that's been quite a helpful exercise for me about what linkage is a bit bare as well, but I need to do something on that. And actually the Lake District, surprisingly. So I've got plenty to go. So I hope Country Life carry on commissioning me. It would be really nice to carry on writing. I love it very much. And I feel I've sort of done it by seizing the opportunity and grabbing the moment. It's a great joy, and perhaps the great joy of all is I never quite know where the next column is coming from. So it's all a bit of a joy and a surprise to me. So that's it. That's my talk. I'll end with another one of my early morning pictures. I think that was just literally a couple of weeks ago in the last hot spell. This is sun rising 4-6 in a Gloucestershire field. So that's my presentation, and I would love to have questions from you. If you do have a question or a comment or a criticism or whatever, please put them into the YouTube chat, and we will be able to pick them up from there, and I'll be happy to talk to you about it. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed that and look forward to talking to you. Thank you.
That was really lovely, Fiona. Thank you so much. And I do hope there are a few questions which Sarah is masterminding. Sarah, are you ready to release some questions to Fiona?
Questions are coming in shortly, I think. There's a little bit of a lag, Andrew, but I mean, yeah, sorry, carry on.
First off, if I may then, my prerogative, you talked a lot about the geography.
Mm-hmm.
We understand underpins all you've done. You talked a bit about some of the people and some of the history, but to what extent do you tie the culture of it all in too? I was thinking particularly of Kettleston.
Oh yes, absolutely. I'll tell you what one of my best source materials is. Again, it was my Desert Island Disc book, and I talk about it a lot. My Bible is Hoskins' Making of the English Landscape, which was published in 1955 and was this really remarkable book telling the story of how the interweaving of geography, history, politics, economics all shape our landscape. And in the 1970s, there was commissioned a county series of Hoskins books. So there's the making of the Gloucestershire landscape, the making of the Sussex landscape, the making of the Suffolk landscape. It's not complete. But, I've got all of those books on my shelf. And the first thing I do is I go to those books and just immerse myself. And they just tell this amazing story about what makes a place special. What are the elements of its history, the physical geography, the cultural geography. And I try and pick up those signals. And of course, when I was at the National Trust, that's what we did all the time, spirit of place, and tried to capture what was special about each area. And so, because I spent all my time at the Trust when I could out visiting, I know the properties really well, and I can always know if I need anything, I can drop in a National Trust property and get an instant buzz and an instant sort of story for my articles.
How lovely. Sarah, are you ready with other questions? Lost Sarah, that's pretty serious.
Oh, here we go. Do I have a favourite walk? You know what? Everybody asks me that. And it's so difficult because I love the place I am. That's kind of who I am. But I suppose for me, joy comes in going up hills. And that's the only disappointment Cambridge has ever been to me, is there aren't enough hills really. But so Knecht or Snowdon, and I'm hopefully going to Snowdonia in August, but it depends on the rules. If there's a mountain involved, I think then I'm pretty happy. So I don't think I have a favourite walk, because every single walk I come back from saying I just loved that walk. But put a mountain in there, and I'm probably that's what is my buzz. Yeah. How far do I go? This is a good question, because it's not a walking column of the kind you see in the Ramblers magazine or something, which says cross this stile, turn left, turn right. And they try and make their walks fairly sort of doable, 4 or 5 miles. I rarely do less than 6. And I think the longest I've done has been, you know, in the high 20s. And actually the one that Andrew showed you in Country Life that's just come out this month, the one that was the Thames, I walked from the source of the Thames, which is within half a mile of my home here, to Lechlade, and that's 23 miles. And that was absolutely great. So I left at 6 in the morning. I got there before 2. I then had the rest of Sunday, you know, nicely. It was a beautiful day as well, nicely to relax. So 23 miles just felt gorgeous, but I wouldn't do that, you know, every time. But mostly I would say it's between about 8 and 10 miles. And I try to sort of go far enough to get a real sense of the place. Someone's asking me about towns and urban walks. Well, the most urban walk I did was the York City walls. And I did that one with another friend. So I'm always co-opting someone to join me who, again, used to work with me at CPRE, and he now runs the North York Moors National Park. But you may know, I also chair the Cathedral's Fabric Commission for England. So I had to visit York Minster. So that's no burden, is it? But anyway, so I decided to walk the city walls with Andy, and it was a terrible day. I think we were blown over by the wind and completely drowned by the rain. But you know, there is something amazing about walking around a walled city, and the walls are pretty intact and completely evocative of the past. So I haven't done many urban walks, but you know, there've been a few, and I might do more because I think they can work brilliantly. And the Derby one actually was going right from the heart of Derby out along the river. Someone else has asked me about plans to visit the Peak District. Well, I don't know why the Peak District wasn't there, because I go to the Peak District when I can. My daughter's living in Sheffield and was at Sheffield University, and I've done lots of nice walks, but maybe not for Country Life actually. So I better put that right, I think, and I will have to do that. But so I've done I've walked in the Peak District for years, again, since I was a child, and the sort of contrast between the dark peak and the light peak, I mean, it's irresistible. So yes, you're right, I must. Oh, I did do one around Buxton. Maybe that one didn't make the graph. So yes, there's plenty of opportunity to find more walks. Another question that's come up is, do I write up the walks that I do overseas? Well, I haven't since I've been writing for Country Life, but I did for Country Walking. And actually Sarah knows this very well, is I still go out for walks early in the morning when we're traveling. And so in California recently, wasn't so recent actually now, it was quite a long time ago, I walked up a path on the Californian coast, you know, in again, very early hours in the morning. That's the only time when you have any time. And again, I just feel if you walk in a place, you feel it. You get a sense of the atmosphere and the sort of sense of place, which you really, as a tourist sort of beaming in, it's very hard to do. And actually Sarah and I have done a lot of walking together when we've been traveling for the college. We tend, if we can, to walk across town, whether it's in New York or Washington or in one of the Californian cities. And I think there's a real joy actually of discovering a place on foot and feeling connected. I haven't actually just tried a Country Life abroad one. I must ask them what they'd feel about it. I think that's a good suggestion. Somebody said, what's the difference between walking with people and walking alone? Well, that's a good question. I mean, I love walking with other people. And as I've said, I quite often corral people to come along. And the challenge there is that you end up talking to somebody so intensely that you don't get that sense of immersion in the place if you're not careful. And I have to work really hard to both have a conversation and to make sure that I'm you know, really listening to the sounds and looking at the space. So having a camera and taking pictures is a good discipline because it makes you stop and look around and think. But actually it's fun to walk with someone, and usually it's somebody who knows the area really well. So I'm getting a lot from them about the qualities of the place and the special place that matters and you know, that I can then understand. If I'm on my own, I actually, when I'm walking in the morning, I freely confess, I do listen to, am I allowed to,
Yes.
what's it called? What's it called? You know what it's called? What's the Audible? So I've been, this since the lockdown, I've listened to nearly all of George Eliot and Elizabeth Gaskell. I've been having an amazing time. So in the morning, you know, on my own, I do listen to Audible. When I'm walking for Country Life, I don't actually. I just immerse myself in the place. So when I'm at home, obviously I've walked these walks a million times each already. So actually the experience of walking is what I'm doing. And I'm quite enjoying catching up on all of these 19th century novelists. And I've learned a lot. You know, I read them all when I was in my 20s, but I haven't read them for decades. So actually I love Audible. If anyone doesn't, it's quite a thing. So, the questions are coming in fast now. So how easily do I manage to avoid having to walk on roads and dealing with traffic? You know, that is absolutely the killer question. It's really hard to find a walk that is all off-road and works and is doable in the time and manageable. And I've had a couple of really bad experiences. One in Cambridge, actually, finding myself on a road I didn't know, just being, you know, beaten into the hedge and really quite frightened and quite upset by the volume of traffic. But mostly if I do end up walking on roads to make a connection or something, I will keep it to the very, very minor roads, the most minor roads. And quite often, because it's early in the morning or not at a busy time of day, I'm fortunate on that. But I really try hard. And that's where the Ordnance Survey planning comes in. And that is actually the challenge, being able to take a route off a map into reality and imagine what it's going to be like. And you've only got one shot, because I can't go back the next day and do it again if it wasn't a good walk. So that is a really big challenge, and it's a good question. So there's a question here about climate change. Gosh, damaging the countryside and the impact of climate change, it's huge. I feel actually climate change, as you all know, is not a thing, it's a process. And it's a process really of unpredictable events. So, you know, if you look back even over the past year, the incredible wet winter and the incredible dry spring, it's not just about temperature, it's about, and the winds we've been having, the really, really intense winds. So all of the, you know, when I was a child growing up, people would say certain kinds of storms would only happen once in 100 years. And then we've had 6 of those storms in the last 10. You know, so what we're seeing is just an unpredictability about the weather and an unpredictability about the way the countryside is reacting. So I doubt if it's possible to say that it will cause certain things to happen, but it makes us less resilient, it makes us more vulnerable. And I think it puts pressure on us to look for, you know, for me, look for solutions that are good for nature. So for example, protecting the peat in the Pennines, looking after wetland, which then can absorb stormwater much better, reducing the pace of intense rainfall running off high ground. You know, you actually managing the countryside in a way that mitigates climate change is a real priority. And I've been having some very interesting conversations during the lockdown about green recovery and use of nature solutions. And there's a lot of thinking going on. Whether it'll happen, of course, we don't know, but a lot of the NGOs are working on that. So somebody's asking about walks that surprise me. And you know what? Every single walk surprises me. I think I know what I'm coming to. I think I've done my research and I've done my reading, and I'm usually carrying with me books. Sometimes it'll be a novel about a place. I mean, I love it when I, you know, capture some of the descriptions that someone's written in a novel or something. So it can be any source of information I find inspiring. But, you know, and the Derbyshire one's a good example. I mean, I know Kedleston really well. And so when you come out of the woods and you get that glorious view down to the house, you know, that I knew of. But actually walking up through the mills of Derby and through, there's an amazing park there whose name I've forgotten, which was put in place by the mill owners to provide a benefit for the local community, and it's still there and still providing the benefit. And so you just think, wow, you know, I didn't know this, or I didn't expect to see this stunning view, or just to be quite so moved and excited. And even walks I know well, you know, you can have some new experience and some new kind of excitement that can happen, because unpredictable things happen when you're walking. So yeah, I do absolutely feel that every single walk surprises and delights me, and it's a great privilege actually to be able to go to all these places. So here there's a question about, from my map, where are the gaps? The gaps are the South Downs and Dorset. So that's really good. Well, someone needs to invite me to go and speak at a conference, basically, in the South Downs and Dorset, and I'll be there like a shot. There is hardly anywhere on that list I showed you, that map I showed you, that I have gone to that I wouldn't have already gone for another reason. And that's partly because my life is just too busy. I don't have time to say, what shall I do this weekend? Because there's always too much to do. And it's also because actually I'm constantly being invited to nice places. I mean, sometimes, you know, the Snowdonia ones tend to be when we go on holiday there. But most of the others are because I was asked to speak at a conference. So the Forsley Badby one, I was invited to speak at a conference in Daventry. Now people might think, Daventry, what's beautiful about Daventry? But actually that countryside of North Northamptonshire, South Warwickshire is absolutely gorgeous. So that's why I've been to the places I've been to. And the question now is, should I be a bit more strategic about it and say, I need to go to the places where the gaps are? And that will be a challenge for the future, but not for my last year at Emma, because I think my last year at Emma is going to be busier than ever, partly because we've just got lots of catching up to do of all the things that haven't happened because of COVID, and partly because I just know that I'm going to be wanting to enjoy and to be immersed in it right up to the end. So I'm gonna find the writing columns, I think, fitting things in. Michelle is going to help me, I know, because she is truly amazing at making the impossible possible, but it is a challenge. So the next question, we're rattling through these, is, do I come across many footpaths on maps that no longer exist on the ground? Well, yes, actually. It's really, really interesting. So anywhere that is a national park, or even an AONB, or owned by the National Trust, or most coastlines, you can be pretty confident that the footpath will be there on the ground. And of course, quite a lot of my walks are in quite well-known areas, and the footpaths therefore are well maintained and on the whole pretty good. But yes, I have had experiences where I've been completely stumped and I've ended up sort of wading through nettles and trying to find my way across, because I often have a sense that if I get across a certain area, the footpath will be at the other end. But I don't really enjoy that, actually. I'm not a walker with a pair of clippers and sort of relish, you know, fighting and trying to kind of expose the weaknesses of the footpath system. I just love it when they're there and they're well maintained and they're beautiful. But there have been times, yeah, when I've come out black and blue and covered in nettle stings and you know, covered in mud or something, because actually there isn't a nice easy path. But you know, not very often, and that's because most of my walks are in places where there are some good land managers and good local authorities looking after them. And you know, there's a tiny little anecdote. I mean, just because I do think the public footpath network of particularly England and Wales is something quite extraordinary. And everywhere you go in the world, you realise that we have this and other countries just don't. They don't even have it in Northern Ireland, actually. They didn't have the same legislation back in the 40s, which safeguarded what was then, what was called the Definitive Path Network. And, you know, you go to many countries, you simply can't head out over countryside. You just can't do it. And it makes me feel incredibly privileged. And it also makes me feel we must walk the footpaths. We must keep them open and keep reminding people how important they are as a resource for people's well-being and recreation and enjoyment. So I do think You know, many of them are there for historic reasons. They were the old path across the fields to the church or connecting villages. They usually had a function, but they were caught in that period of the late 1940s, early 1950s, before big developments swept things away. And therefore we do have this incredible document, if you like, of rural England in particular, which is just incredible. And then maybe this is the last question, because I'm not sure, you know, how long people want to go, but there's a question about, has Country Life had a walking column before? Well, no, I don't believe it has. It's had lots of people write occasionally about walks. But when I went to see the editor who I knew through the National Trust, I said to him, I think we need a walking column. This was about 3.5 years ago. And he went, oh, that's a good idea. And actually, the rest is history. He decided a walking column was a good idea. And as I say, it's just an enormous privilege to do it. And so far, they seem to like it. I mean, I'm quite sure at some point they will reshuffle and decide on different priorities. But and it's only once a month. He did say to me that they have lots of contributors, as anyone who reads the magazine will know. And writing a weekly column, he says, is almost impossible because it comes round the minute it's done. You don't never have the breath. So a monthly column is actually pretty perfect because you've got time to think about it, to do some reading, to really plan. And, you know, even if you're really busy, to do a walk like that once a month is possible. And it's both a discipline, but also a great, great pleasure. So I think I've rattled through, Andrew, lots of questions, and people may be exhausted by my responses, but I hope I've answered them. Yeah.
What we're excited by, Fiona, is your incredible energy, not just in talking about this topic, but walks you had to do, the miles you put in. You all believe, everybody with entitled to wear an emmanuel tie or whatever form of dress they choose, we choose to believe that we know you well, and that's mainly because of your lovely open personality. We know about your love of everything to do with the manual. And that, of course, bonds you with us all. And that even shone through tonight. So it's been wonderful to hear another side of your life, and indeed, may I say, another side of your personality, which is your passion for walking, your love of the geography and history and culture that goes with those walks, and your great flair of communicating it through your columns, but face to face, as you've just done. Communicating that passion. And I imagine, I really do, inspiring many thousands of people to get onto their feet and out of their houses and try this strange thing, walking for themselves. I'm sure getting huge reward from doing so. So it's just great that you've talked to us tonight. Thank you so much. As I say, it is a different part of your personality, and it's fun for us to hear you talking about something which isn't a manual, which you do so wonderfully and so well, all of us. So thank you so much. We're terribly enjoying your period in office, and we all have shades of regret that it will quite naturally and properly after 8 years come to an end. But we'll have memories like this, which will endure with us for years to come. And particularly when we go, maybe we'll take some of your walks for ourselves. So you've inspired us yet again, and I just can't thank you enough. Master, you've been a great host and guest. Have a lovely rest of your evening, and above all, a lovely remainder of your tenure with us at Emmanuel. Thank you so much, Fiona. It's been lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew, for everything you said. I certainly will. It's been lovely to talk to you tonight, and I'm really looking forward, slightly wistfully, but with lots of love in my heart for my last year. And I won't be disappearing. I shall be around afterwards, but that'd be nice. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Very much. And
great questions. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I really hope that we'll see you soon. Not quite sure how, but we really want to see people as soon as we possibly can. So take care. Thank you.
good night.
Good night.